Well, you're welcome back, and it's time for us to have a bit of a chat. Let's do some AM talk. There's a lot to talk about. Parliament was interesting yesterday. The finance minister passed through. They also had a bit of a chat about Okada and jumping out of their cars to jump onto Okada. Very interesting anecdotes there as they debated whether or not to legalize the public transport with the use of motorbikes. And then, of course, we definitely have to spend a little bit of time talking about a couple of other issues which we will raise as the conversation goes on. So let's say good morning to our guests, both from Parliament. First of all, the Honourable Member of Parliament for Isikumodo Bing Brakwa, Mr. Anthony Ifa is here with us, and of course he's also a member of the Parliamentary Select Committee on Finance. Al-Hassan Suhini is our other guest. He's of course the Honourable Member of Parliament for Tamale North. We know at least one committee that he's on, and that's the Appointments Committee. Am I right?
Right.
Excellent.
I'm also on the Lands and Forestry Committee.
Okay. So why don't we first start with the Finance Minister's submission in Parliament yesterday. Let's take a look at this quick report and then we'll get to it.
Mr. Furiata was in the House to deliver a statement on the success of the Eurobond, the depreciation of the cedi, and Ghana's exit from the IMF. The Ghana cedi has performed poorly this year against its major counterpart, especially the US dollar. Businesses, especially importers, raised alarm when the cedi's exchange rate to the dollar inched closer to the 6 cedi mark. Others, borrowing from a phrase popularized by the Vice President whilst in opposition, blamed it on weak economic fundamentals. The Finance Minister, however, disagrees. He said people talking down the cedi is largely to blame for its recent fall in value.
It's clear from the data that the appreciation of the cedi was not due to weak economic fundamentals, but rather a combination of structural rigidities and the apparent speculative behavior of portfolio investors and market participants. It is also noteworthy that while this is a challenge, the cedi has, however, performed better over the last 2 years than when compared specifically to 2012 to 2016.
He says a committee will be established soon to look into the depreciation.
The President has directed that I investigate the structural causes for the depreciation of the cedi and to propose measures to address the situation. The Governor and I will put a bipartisan committee together to proceed immediately.
The Finance Minister, citing some macroeconomic indicators, said the economy has been put on a good footing.
Our recent success in the Eurobond market demonstrates the clear confidence that the international community has in the work that we have done. It is hard work, and we know that this confidence resonates with our vision of a Ghana beyond aid.
But the minority won't have any of that. Members of the Finance Committee, Fifi Kwete and Isaac Adongo, are challenging the claim.
If you got 15.4, which is coming on a mess, what about 18% going up to 21%? Then we mess. What shall we call it? Super mess. Left by your government. So please, don't come misleading us. Let the truth be told. But that is not all. The cedi depreciation. Where did it end at the end of 2008? It ended at 20.2. And did not stop there. As a result of the massive, the crisis that you left behind, the first 5 months of 2009 saw depreciation going up by an additional 18% before the NDC government brought it down. So the fact that there is an exit out of IMF doesn't mean that we are out of the way, because your history shows that you have gone out of IMF before, but the mess you left in 2 short years after that completion was absolutely terrible. The most abysmal economic performance in our history.
Our total revenue, including grants, what we went and begged foreigners to give us, was only 47 billion. Mr. Speaker, 5 billion of our wage bill, 5 billion of our interest costs put together was financed through borrowing, Mr. Speaker. We borrowed to pay wages and salaries. We borrowed to pay interest costs by 5 billion Ghana cedis. And Mr. Speaker, you are celebrating this. Mr. Speaker, what is worrying? Mr. Speaker, what is worrying is the fact that goods and services, there's nothing now left to pay for goods and services, and we go to borrow to pay for goods and services.
Fifi Kwete and Isaac Adungu there spitting fire. in response to the finance minister's submission. And gentlemen, I think that's a good place to start. I'll start with you, Mr. Suhuyini, because the opposition's reaction there, you know, quite fiery to something that, on the face of it, you would have thought was conciliatory. I mean, yes, good things have happened. cedi has regained some value. Successfully oversubscribed Eurobond, which, let's not deny it, it means that the international market has confidence in us. And then, of course, we've finally come to an end of IMF. I mean, these are good things. And then the finance minister says, let's have a bipartisan committee to make sure we don't go back, especially to the problems that the cedi has, faced. Are these not positive messages to which a positive response would have been welcome?
Well, thank you very much, Kojo. Good morning, and let me say good morning to my honorable colleague and good morning to our viewers, especially the very good people of the Tamale North constituency. Yes, I mean, put the way you put it, one will be at a loss as to why, that fiery reaction. But listen to the finance minister, read his text if you missed it. And as usual, it will be impossible for you to miss the attempt to brand the NDC as a regime that failed and a regime that created a so-called mess, and for which he is inviting everybody, including the NDC that is supposed to have created a mess, to help resolve. I mean, first of all, that is ironic. But I think that as politicians, the crisis that we find ourselves in as a country can consume all of us if we do not begin to be a bit honest about the dealings that we engage in, especially on behalf of the good people of this country. I say dishonesty because our country seems to go through this cycle almost every time, and almost every government have faced or have had its share of some of this turbulence in our economy. But when we are in opposition, the way we appreciate these problems tend to smack of dishonesty. And that is why I'm saying that it is important that we do not allow that level of dishonesty to get to a point where the people will lose faith in us. It is already happening, but we can do something about the rate at which it is happening. For example, if you are talking about what kind of economy the NPP inherited, it is disingenuous and I think unfair to make it seem the way the NPP, especially the finance minister and the president, have oftentimes made it seem. Because clearly, all the indicators, the macro indicators, were pointing up, even if they were not good. The predictions showed that due to some, actions and decisions that had been taken, things were looking up. For example, there was a projection by international, market players that our GDP was going to be at about 8% in 2017. The interest rate was pointing down when they took over. The projections showed that it was going down. Inflation rate was going down when they took over. They also took over an expanded economy. Despite the fact that it was growing at 3%, what, again, they refused to accept was the fact that 3% of a GDP of 6 billion is different from 3% of a GDP of, say, 8 billion. I'm not using, exact figures. So if the GDP was 6 billion and it grew by 4% to get to 6 billion, the next year, if you grow by 3%, it does not mean you have contracted. It simply means that the growth is slow, but there is growth. But again, at the time, it was made to seem as if a 3%, 4% growth of a bigger economy did not really impact, showed that we were contracting. I mean, that was the nature of the argument at the time. So you have that situation being created, that dishonest situation being created, and then the NPP comes into office. Now, when I say expanded economy, I talk about, for example, in the area of oil. Today, what was handed over to them is almost twice what the NDC managed with, as far as revenue is concerned. How much NDC earned from our revenue, from our oil proceeds, was almost doubled before it was handed over to them. The introduction of the Sankofa field and others made sure that we are now getting more than $1.4 billion from our oil revenue. That is something the NDC didn't have when they managed the economy. But that is what the NDC made sure was available to the government when they took over. So
yes, does that mean what they're saying is inaccurate? I mean, they quote correct figures, and your government had been in power for 8 years. So even if the indicators were pointing up, that simply means that whatever problem had been caused during your 8-year tenure, there was less of it happening at the time you handed over. It's still not really a claim to success, is it? Especially if what they're saying is not false.
I'll explain that. Again, it is important to understand what created whatever problem was beginning to look good when they took over. Now, I hear the energy minister, for example, come to Parliament and talk about natural causes. I hear the finance minister talk about rigidities. And then I ask myself, why then was President Mahama ridiculed when he talked about natural causes that led to shortage of gas supply, which affected our energy provision? Why was it ridiculous for him to assign the energy crisis that we were faced with what was actually caused by natural circumstances, like the break in the West African gas pipeline? Then again, we had a short, we had prices of our exports coming down. Cocoa, gold, and others started coming down. Now, no government has control over that. You again had an issue of the single spine salary structure, which was bequeathed to the NDC by the NPP. Now, this implementation led to the doubling of salaries in some cases, but it also meant that government had less revenue to do work. And so these were some of the problems that created the problem that the NDC had to deal with. So you had the single spine salary structure albatross. You also had the fall in commodity prices, which is not controlled by the government. Then you had the energy crisis, which experts have all agreed was as a result of long neglect of investment in the sector. So it wasn't just supposed to have been sorted out within the 8 years of the NDC, but under President Rawlings, we had the energy crisis. Under President Kufuor, we had it. Under President Mills, we had it. And it just got worse under President Mahama as a result of the long neglect in this, of that sector. So
it sounds to me like what you're saying is, yeah, we were bad, but not as bad as you're saying.
No, I'm saying the situation became bad, not as a result of anybody's incompetence or negligence as it was portrayed. And remember, my discussion is premised on honesty. It was not based on anybody's incompetence or anybody's, mismanagement. It was as a result of natural circumstances, but because of competence and perhaps prudent decisions that were taken at the time that the NDC was leaving office, the things had started looking good. And so if, for example, the vice president refused at the time to accept the same reasons that are given today for the fall of the cedi and only attributed it to weak fundamentals and incompetence management, it sounds dishonest to the average Ghanaian when today the same thing is happening and then you give the same explanations that you rejected before. So I'm saying that let us as a group of people who make a livelihood or a living out of politics, at least attach some level of honesty and agree when we have to agree with the issues that affect our country and come together to resolve it. I mean, this proposal of a bipartisan approach to what we are currently faced with is not coming from the finance minister. I mean, it's not the first time that I've read about the former president about, I think, 4 weeks ago, His Excellency John Mahama make the same proposal that we should use the Senchi consensus like, you know, method of dealing with the cedi because of his experience. When we called for a national dialogue on the economy, the NPP, of course, boycotted, but it still went on with some leading members of the NPP attending on their own. They were taken to the cleaners, but they did attend and contributed to the consensus, the report. Now, it was that report that formed the basis of the IMF package we just exited. Now, you recall the talk about homegrown solutions and the need to partner the IMF for policy validation. In fact, at the time it was called policy credibility.
That's right.
I've heard this new government, you know, retheme it, policy validation, you know, because they extended the program, which was actually, you know, couched out of the consensus that was reached at Senchi. So I'm saying that let us listen to each other more. Let us be honest about the problems we face as a country. And let us not run down each other, you know, on the basis of falsehood, you know, because the rigidities that he speaks of the economy, you know, the appetite, foreign appetite that we have all acquired, that the president speaks of, these were all things spoken of by the previous government, which were rejected. And the president at the time promised us, you know, promised to move the Gogisberg economy to a responsive economy, as if he already had the idea. So when he's now calling on people to come with ideas, then you wonder if it was just one of those dishonest ways of getting power and now looking at what to do with the power.
Okay. Mr. Ifa, I'm sure you have a lot to say in response to what Mr. Suhini has said, but I have a question of my own, so perhaps you can combine that with your response. There's a lot about yesterday's event, if you will, that had my eyebrows raised. I saw some flyers come out before, you know, to advertise the fact that the finance minister was coming to speak to Parliament. This is not unusual, by the way. Seth Tekwe did it a number of times. Just 2 weeks ago, Mr. Amewu also requested to come speak to Parliament. So yes, it's something that the executive does. But to advertise it with posters, I've got to say, I couldn't recall having seen that before. And then the delivery itself, I mean, there were these three things he wanted to inform the nation about through Parliament. But then there was a lot of reference to the previous government and a lot of, oh, we did better than them and we've done it. I don't know, I mean, for you, listening to that, did it not seem to remove a little bit of the shine, the fact that there was some political mud slinging, you know, thrown in there?
Well, I would also like to reciprocate a greeting from Honorable Suhini and to say good morning to you and our cherished viewers, especially mine of Esmoro Mbrakwa. I would also like to extend some condolences to Honorable P.C. Apiufori. I understand he lost the lawyer daughter yesterday or this morning. I just got information. And so my condolences to the people of Esmoro Mbrakwa, and particularly P.C. Apiufori. I'm sure we'll be there to commiserate with him. Okay. Now, yesterday in Parliament, I think was well-intentioned. The minister came to tell us about what is happening. In the recent month, I think the key issues that have come up were the conclusion of the ECF, what do we call it, the IMF trying to come out of IMF, the bond that was oversubscribed, and also to talk about the currency that had devalued. That was a negative for the party, yet he came forward to speak about it.
Well, he came forward to talk about how it has started to gain value.
Yes, of course, he said, and if we were to read, I don't think we have to do that today, but essentially he said it had suffered some shocks in the last quarter, being the very first quarter of the year. So there was an admission of some challenges with that. So he didn't come only to speak about the good things, about coming out of IMF and then raising 3 billion on the market, international market. So the intention was give information to Parliament, but it's in the House. When any person makes a statement, we have debates, and the speaker actually limited the debate to 3 on each side. So listening to him, I thought he was being frank and getting us together to understand that there are some successes. They may be moderate, but obviously there are some successes. And we still have a few challenges on our hand. And the call for us to have a convergence of thoughts to see how we can resolve our issues as Ghanaians, I think was welcoming and inviting for Ghanaians. The whole debate turned when we heard especially Adongo, who was speaking, to whom the minority leader yielded his round two, and I would say that my ears were breaking because the shouting was too much. You can still communicate what you know and what you understand, but the shouting was too much, and people kept telling him, even from his side, that calm down and make your points. So if we must communicate, I think we should get people to really listen and hear us. I think it was too much shouting. Then the majority leader brought up one point, that when he made reference to outstanding orders, that when there's a statement on the floor of the House, you ordinarily will have to restrict yourself to what's being provided. It was not a second reading of the budget. And I'm sure if the speaker had not guided us, then everybody would start talking. Now, when the minister talked about 2014, 2015, and all that, those were facts, and I'm happy you said that these were facts. They are fundamental. To say, for example, that the interest rate at the time was about 26% on average, it's just the truth. To say, for instance, that the inflation rate was about 17% is the truth. And also to say that the depreciation of the cedi in 2015 and 2016 was about 31% is also the truth. So there was really no need for us as members of parliament to be screaming on top of our voices to make people hear us. But any counter arguments that we had was welcome. And I appreciate the points about that Suhini made, that if only would be candid with the issues, Ghana will be prosperous. Asking for candid opinions should go to both sides of the House, and in fact all Ghanaians. Because we have had cause to listen, occasions to listen to clear untruths that are propagated by the minority in several of the press conferences, and some of them are really not the case. Now, what we face as a country, the challenge we face as a country, is that we don't have so many people reading primary documents, having their information from primary sources. And last night, I was speaking to somebody in Germany in the night, and the view was that this is what the NDC has said over and over and over. And I said to her, I asked her that did the MPP say anything at all? She didn't seem to have heard what the MPP said. And I was, you see, so I want Ghana to grow. We have a common aspiration as a people to see our country grow. And so if indeed there is evidence that there's success in raising bonds for infrastructure and for liquidity management of the country, it should be in our interest, because we don't have a stockpile of cash for the activities that we have. We have arrears that we are still paying. Yesterday we spoke about the health insurance claim by Cape Coast Hospital, and we looked at how the National Health Insurance Authority have to put themselves together to sort the hospital out. And perhaps there are several other hospitals that haven't made such claims. But this was a crisis call too. So the conversation may continue on and on and on. And I think for those of us who are in Parliament, who are leading the debate on these matters, let us be fair, both sides. Let us speak the truth. If we are only making references to the numbers, then indeed the performance of the MPP has been superior to the NDC.
But there's a context to it.
Pardon me.
There's a context to it.
Yes,
All
that's
the
what I'm
figures
saying.
have
That
context.
Yes, that's why I'm saying that if we're judging by the numbers,
Like numbers
ordinarily,
only.
and these numbers are indications of the health of the economy. If you were ill and you went to the hospital, they'll take your temperature of yours, they may take the pressure of your body, and they made the other tests. That will be the health. And these are numbers. Even the doctors receive numbers, and they interpret the numbers to see that, oh, you are healthy, you are not healthy, you need some support. So stating the facts as they are should not engage us in fights where we think that it is not the case. We can always research, especially for Parliament, to argue about numbers. I don't think it's worth it. We should be able to find a primary source. I will not blame one side of the House. I think all of us sometimes overreact to some statements, and we are intentioned to, as it were, defend whether it's true or not. My view, sincerely, is that it's Ghanaians that matter.
Right. Let me ask you this. I mean, the Economic Intelligence Unit made a prediction before the election. And a lot of what they said was, at the time, you know, kind of, well, some of it was accepted by the NDC, some of it was rejected. But one of the things they said, and it's what you were referring, Mr. Suhini was referring to, was the fact that things are on the up. And they predicted growth and lots of positive indicators in 2017 and beyond. This appears to have come to pass. So should the NPP, who, by the way, also I think they even predicted that the NPP would win. And the NPP embraced that prediction. Should they not also be, what's the word? No, not magnanimous, you're not being kind, but should you not be gracious and accept that, well, part of that prediction should be attributed to the previous government, to the work that they did to turn things around?
I don't think anybody is saying that NDC did not do anything over the last 8 years that they were in power. Nobody has said that. It kind of
sounds like that when you listen to the finance minister.
Nobody ever said that. And I don't believe that. There were some successes, obviously.
You call them incompetent.
When, like I said, if we had to refer to the numbers, and the last time I made some statements regarding the contribution of each of these governments or parties to the GDP. On average, over the last 4 years of the NDC, their average yearly annual contribution to GDP was about 22 billion cedis. That's respectable, isn't it? Now, when the MPP came to power between 2017 and 2018, the annual contribution to GDP on average, nominal, I'm talking of the nominal numbers, has been about 40 billion over the last 2 years. So while NDC has made some contributions, the MPP is also making some significant contributions. It's worth noting, what is it that the NDC did that did not perhaps help us in the growth trajectory, so that we can improve on that? Now, what is it that NPP is doing that we are seeing 40 billion cedis addition to the nominal GDP per annum, 2017 and 2018 on average? So as a country, we learn from what somebody did and what we also doing, because the future is there for another government to come. And so if we have increased our GDP on an annual basis on average up by 22 billion, and we are now doing 40, then a new government that comes should take this as a reference point to do things that will increase our GDP growth nominal from the 40 on average that we're doing to maybe a 50 and a 60. It is only then that as a country will benefit from all that we talk about.
And I'm pretty sure that 20 billion that the NDC was doing in their last 4 years was an improvement on what they inherited. But let me ask this. Mr. Adongo makes a claim that this reason being given by the finance minister for the 3 billion bond, that you're going to use it to fund capital expenditure. Can't be true. Because in the budget, capital expenditure is less than 400 million. But you've borrowed 3 billion. So there are other expenditure items, bigger expenditure items on your list. And that this capital expenditure is just, it just can't be the truth.
Well, that is where the divergence comes again. When the minister has come to the House, Parliament, to tell us that he's borrowing 3 billion, and the prospectus, when they went for the roadshow, was clear that they are injecting 2 billion into infrastructure and 1 billion for liability management, which is running the economy as in budgetary support. So where is this lie coming from? To suggest that the minister lied to the House or to the people of Ghana.
So what does it mean? You are just going to overspend your budget?
No, what that means, we are not
budgeted less than 400
the budget. The budget itself, or the government of Ghana sources, isn't the only source of funding for any of in our developments. Otherwise, why should we be talking about get fund going to borrow the equivalent of $1.5 billion to complete infrastructure projects and to start new ones? You see, this is not part of the annual allocation to various, as it were, MDAs. What about the Sino-Hydro that we're talking about? And hopefully in April, we'll be seeing Sino-Hydro, the funds coming in. That is not part of the budget amount. And we get grants. So for him to suggest that the Minister of Finance was economical with the truth as to the usage of the funding, then I have challenges with him. And in the case of Adongo, I think he's a young man, he's learning, he's doing his best, and almost all the time, he uses expressions that are not palatable when the Minister of Finance is there, when the governor sits with us. He uses words that, for some of us, even on the committee with him, we feel uncomfortable and we draw his attention to it. This is public space. The minister did not come to insult anybody. Let us wait for the money to come. And they hold the minister to it, that you said we're using 2 billion. What infrastructure items did you have in mind or anticipate before you went for the money? Have you used it? And as a member, as Parliament, we have the opportunity, even during the media review, we can ask those pertinent questions. But to say that right from the beginning is not true, then what is the truth then? Is it the paper that he was holding and throwing about for everybody to see? Is that the truth? No. So I'll caution my brother that we all are in together, and that certain a little respect. Sometimes you lose it when you don't give it to who deserves it.
So to clarify, the explanation you're giving is that, well, yes, in the budget you may have said that you're going to spend less than 400 million on capital expenditure, but nothing stops you from sourcing more and spending more.
And spend more. And for instance, if you look at the investment in railways, can our budget support railway infrastructure to move rails, Western Corridor to Paga and beyond? Can our budget, the total budget as we have 2018 put together, is just about 206 billion Ghana cedis. At today's rates, we are looking at $40 to $50 billion. And that is not enough to do all the infrastructure we have.
But you presented a certain plan, a certain budget to the Parliament for approval, and you said we will spend this much on railway infrastructure. You didn't say, and we'll go and borrow against our children's future to spend a little bit more.
The sources of funding are all spelled out in the budget. And if you read the document, it's called the Budget Statement and Economic Policy of Government. So the budget statement may indicate the allocations per MDA, and then when you say policy, what's the direction? Where are we going? How are we getting additional sources? And every source, projected source of revenue is captured in a budget. And so if the government, this 3 billion that we went to raise was approved in the budget, and it was clear that 2 billion will be used for infrastructure development. So it's Parliament that approved the 3 billion.
Okay.
So there's a plan that we are following. So it's not a surprise. This is not springing any surprise at us.
I'm sure Mr. Suhini will have something to say about that, but let me check one more fact with you and then we'll bring Mr. Suhini in. The wage bill, another point that Mr. Adongo seeks to make. At the beginning of the IMF program, it was about 14 billion. It's 22 billion now. That's more than 50% increase. In fact, I think he said something like 53% increase in the wage bill. This is in the midst of all of this talk about financial discipline and fiscal and this and that, and we've set up all kinds of establishments to make sure that we don't overspend. But the wage bill is ballooning, continues to balloon. 53% increase is massive.
So do you believe what Adongo said regarding the number for the wage bill? Do you believe it just by reading what he said?
Well, I'm putting it to you so that if it's not true, you can refute it.
Unfortunately, we don't have the budget document with us here. We should always check to see that indeed we are doing 22 billion from 14 billion. What I know is that the amount of money that we allocated for the wage bill is approximately the same that we've budgeted for the interest rate. And my memory, if my memory serves me, it's just around 19 billion. That's why I said let's always check. These are commitments. When you make these statements, you need to back them. I don't have my budget. I would have opened to that page to see how much exactly.
So it's just about 3 billion less than he is saying.
And 3 billion is a huge sum of money. Huge. So let us be clear what we're doing. There is no
not as huge as the 5 billion increase, though, if the 19 billion figure is correct.
Yeah, I'm saying that we don't have the budget. But what I remember is that the allocation for debt service or interest payments is approximately the same as the wage bill. And that is what I remember in reading all the millions of thousands of numbers that were published for us. So there is some, and I don't know whether he talked about the interest coverage, but we know that we have a fundamental structural challenge where the tax revenue that we collect is spent only 3 budget items and it's finished. Now, how do we survive as a country? How do we?
How did the wage bill grow so much? Wasn't there like a freeze on employment and a number of things that were all done with the aim of spending less on wage? I'm sorry, this is the last thing, and then I'll have to bring in Mr. Suhini.
We always have to check what the number is. But the wage bill, at least, we saw the public service receive some increases in wages.
Right.
And that is a routine. It's more like regular feature of the budget. Yeah. So it couldn't have remained at 14 billion if the numbers you quoted are correct. We in Parliament have the opportunity to always do research. We always have the opportunity to find out what it is. We don't throw any statement and ask people to believe. You need to check. I, for example, would always check what the minister has said to us.
You know, Kojo, I am surprised that you are surprised about the ballooning of the wage bill. Our government is elephantic. I mean, from 110, now we're talking over 130 ministers, just ministers
that
alone.
Still can't account for 5 billion.
I'm just saying that, they say when the fish starts to rot, it starts from the head. So if you have such a huge size of just ministers, then you can imagine the other, officers around the minister, around the presidency, and how much they are all contributing to this wage bill. And then it's quite interesting.
I would hesitate to give that amount of weight.
I'm just saying that, I mean, it lies there. When you have a big government size, it becomes difficult to control anything beneath it. I mean, the presidency has grown exponentially in terms of the number of people who work there. We have all discussed it here. The ministries have grown exponentially, and sometimes you don't, in fact, people who are in the service, the public and civil service, don't even know the rules of some of these people they have brought to their places. This closer, for the first time in our history, had to hold a press conference to complain about these things. So you shouldn't be surprised that we have this size. But then I am surprised that Honorable Efa cannot remember, the figures. But
do you have them? Do you have these figures?
Wait a minute. He can't remember the figures. But then he casts doubt and even urges that Adongo shouldn't be believed. Just on that basis. But he doesn't even have it. Adongo was speaking on the floor of Parliament where records are important. And I want to believe he did his checks well before he made that comment. If not, he would have been asked to withdraw.
But you're doing the same thing.
No, I am not passing judgment. I just want...
You say you want to believe
Mr.
Adongo.
It is only fair to do because of the context. I've provided the reason why I want to believe him. Because Parliament does not just tolerate anything that is not verifiable.
But people have said the wrong thing in Parliament.
And they have been asked to withdraw when their attention... Yes, they have been asked to withdraw. So I'm saying that if he did that on the floor of Parliament, I am more inclined to give him the benefit of the doubt than someone who can't even remember.
I think we should just check the figures.
Yes,
that's the best thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the point,
because I said it, you check the numbers.
Yeah. But then,
so we'll check. I know our team is already looking at that.
Yeah,
so.
and you know, I also noticed your surprise that flyers and others went out before the finance minister came there. I have said it on your platform. If you are minded to check, I think sometime last year, that this is a fanfare government. I mean, everything is about fanfare. It's about, you know, the pomp and pageantry, and very little substance, you know, comes from that. And you recall I said at the time that I think that people who are engaged in artworks and what's it called, events management, are those making a lot of money under this government, because it's all about the hype and very little substance. Then he talks about, you know, in his response to your question as to whether they should not be gracious enough to accept that some of these gains that they are boasting about were as a result of the hard work that the previous government puts in. Then he talks about the numbers, and that confuses me a bit. I mean, 500 is meaningless without a context. 500, what? But in the context of money, it may be meaningful. So if you are looking at the numbers in isolation without the context, and I painted the context that the NDC had to manage the economy, less revenue compared to now, more crises that had to be managed, crises that were not created, they were not man-made crises.
That's still debatable.
Yeah.
It's still debatable.
No, I mean, for example, Kojo, the commodity prices that went down, how was it man-made?
But how about the fact that we had an economy that was a slave to commodity prices?
Well, so that then extends the discussion to the point that the president said he knew the solution of how to change the Gogisberg economy to, you know, a responsive economy, and is simply not finding its way. So I'm saying that the context is important. And again, what beats my mind is when they point to the numbers and claim the credit, you know, without, let me just give you a scenario. If you go to the hospital, the doctor treats you, he gives you medication, and then you are discharged. You get home, and your wife gives you the best of meals that will make you recuperate, you know, much faster.
Right.
Who do you give the credit to? Your wife or the doctor of your healing? I mean, so that is what we are faced with. The medicine, the hard work was done by the NDC. You came to just continue managing, and in some cases mismanaging some of the areas. And so you have to be, at least like the word you use, gracious enough to understand. And that's why I'm talking about honesty. Right. I mean, today we are celebrating successful issuance of bonds, when in the past we poo-pooed bonds and said that, you know, getting oversubscription really meant nothing. Dr. Baumia in his lectures told us how bonds, we could not borrow our way out of the economy after we had successfully gotten bonds.
I've been taken by surprise. I must apologize. One thing we do appear to agree on is that there's a need for honesty. I think it's always good to start from a point of agreement. Mm-hmm. So if indeed we are going to go forward and find a lasting solution to the problems that plague our economy, then perhaps that honesty should be the foundation on which we build it. I want to say a big thank you to the both of you. I wanted to spend a lot more time with you. We have so much more to talk about, but I'm being told that we have completely run out of time. I don't know how we managed that. But we've been hearing from the Honourable Member of Parliament for Isukumodobe Brakwa, Mr. Anthony Ifa, and the Honourable Member of Parliament for Tamale North, Mr. Al-Hassan Suhini. And of course, we've been talking about the Finance Minister's visit to Parliament yesterday.